Hello, everybody, and I hope everybody is safe and sound everywhere in the globe. We're here in another virtual session for InfoSec Girls. So we have like amazing speakers today around the globe. A few people are from India and one from around the globe. So we start up with our first session by Keerthi, and she would be giving us a session on compliance. Basically the insights into SOC report. She's based out of Canada, and she's worked with major Big Four companies, and she's experienced professional in working on different frameworks and regulatory requirements globally for various clients spread across different industries. So Mani, over to you.
Thank you, Saman. Let me start by sharing my screen.
Yeah, sure.
Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Saman, for that introduction. I'm really happy to meet you all guys to this meeting for InfoSec Girls. So a bit about me. So I'm Keerthi, and I did my MBA in IT Business Management. I'm basically an IT advisory professional with more than 6 years experience. My experience is spread across globally, across India, UK, Bermuda, and Canada. So my major focus areas are security and risk management. And I'm very much interested in research, majorly involving information security / IT security / cyber security. And I also write a bit, have a personal blog writing about different countries that I traveled. So this is about me, and I'm happy to share the agenda that I want to share today with you guys about the topic compliance and insight into the SOC reports. So let's go on to the agenda. So in the session that I'm speaking today, I would be talking about these 5 things, which is basically an introduction, a basic introduction to SOC reports. What do they mean? I'm going to address curious questions from a first-time listener about what is a SOC report and why we do it. Then I'm going to explain what are the flavors of SOC reports. Once I go to the 3rd step, I think you would understand there are different SOC reports and what are the differences between different SOC reports. And again, deep delving into that, you have SOC1 and SOC2. So I'm going to explain a bit about SOC1 and SOC2 as well. So getting started. So let's go to the next one, which is basically what is a SOC report? So you might have come across the term SOC report, majorly from a compliance perspective when you're auditing or come across a service organization or trying to get services from a service organization, you would have heard a term called SOC report. So what is a SOC report? So SOC report for service organizations are designed to help the organizations because they provide services to other entities. And also they want to build confidence into the customers, saying that we have some internal controls. And this is issued by an independent third-party reporter. So that's why it's either governed by a third-party organization or like a governing body like AICPA, ICE, the International Board, or like the Canadian standards, which is CSAE 3416. So this is basically a term which you would be hearing recently. The reason being, you would have seen a lot of customers are storing their data on the cloud. So that's the reason why it's gaining a lot of momentum right now. And the point is that the reason why the SOC report terminology has been there way long, like in 2011, if I'm not wrong. But still, it has been catching up now because most of the customers or most of the companies that you work with might use off-the-shelf products. So that's the reason why you would hear a SOC report. So I'm going to answer now the 5 W's and 1 H. And this is the part where I was talking about the 5 curious questions and 1 H. So why do you, so once you understood what is a SOC report, why do you think you need a SOC report? So first of all, the first reason is that to be compliant and also to drive your business. So let's take an example. So the SOC report was specifically designed for service organizations providing services that impact financial reporting for their customers. When I say the statement, I want to explain how it applies to companies. Let's take a payroll company. So for example, payroll companies process payroll transactions and provide reports to their customers, who in turn use their reports to record transactions in their financial records. Therefore, the payroll company's controls, or I would say lack of controls, could impact the accuracy of the financial reporting of its customers. So let's say I am the person who would be using a payroll processor, any kind of payroll processor that you come across, and you realize that you're directly using their services. Oh, I just go on to a site, click on a username and a password. I can see all the details of my salary, pay slips, and everything. So that is actually hitting my company's financial statements. So I need an assurance from that company saying that they really have controls in terms of access, change, operations, that they have an assurance saying that the controls are robust and can be assured. So that's the reason why you need to do a SOC report. Now, the use of cloud computing, outsourced IT functions, and other services that do not necessarily involve SOC reporting have resulted in a need for an assurance report other than a SOC report. SOC1 report. As you go into the next phase of my presentation, you will understand why I'm saying SOC1, SOC2 report. Now, here in the context, I'm talking about it. Instead of a SOC1 report, you would come across something called SOC2 report, which is basically talking about reports on controls at a service organization, but not related to the ICFR, which is internal controls over financial reporting, but more on 5 trust principles. The 5 trust principles are basically confidentiality, integrity, availability, security, and privacy. So you would have heard these terms interchangeably across information security, IT security, right? So this is the place where they want to really combine it together and say the cloud provider has all these 5 principles if relevant. It's not necessary that are the 5 principles that the cloud provider or the third party would have all the controls relevant to all the 5 trust principles. So SOC 2, as I talk about this, SOC 2 would do reports basically talk about these 5 trust principles. So now I've addressed the question why. Now let's go on to the question when. So when you get certified, you're basically telling clients that you have internal controls in place to use your services. So this is basically giving an advantage to you, which is cutting down on your competition, saying that your competitor does not have it, but you have it. So it's a competitive advantage. So when you get certified. Now coming to the question, who? So who would do that? So all the folks in the providing services, for example, as a customer, you're using a solution. So in that case, it depends upon what your business requirements are. Are you trying to look from a service provider, a SOC1 report or a SOC2 report? It's basically addressing the objective. What are you trying to fulfill as a user or a customer? I'm going to use these terms user and customer interchangeably, which basically talks about a firm or a company which uses the services of a third party, which has to get a SOC1, SOC2 report audited. Now, so what? So now you understood that you need to get certified because you're providing services to the companies that are there. You need to understand which services you're providing as a provider. Like, are you providing payroll services? Are you providing other services like, cloud services? So you need to get the scoping in to understand what you're providing, and accordingly, you would choose between a SOC1 and a SOC2 report and issue it. Now, coming to the question, when? So as I go into the next phases of the presentation, I'm going to use this phrase a lot in this particular slide. The reason is that we are trying to address like the 5 W's, which are like critical to understand what is a SOC report and what are the types. So yeah, so when do you get a SOC report? So it depends on the customer need. Let's say you would get a type 1 or a type 2 report. I will be talking in detail about type 1 and type 2 in the following slides, but just to give an idea, when you can get a type 1 or a type 2 report. So I've addressed that when. So where do I get it? So where do I get certified from? So you basically follow a standard which is accepted globally. For example, AICPA. which is like the US standard, the accounting board, and you have a standard related to AICPA, which is SSI 18. Earlier it was SSI 16, but now it's SSI 18. So you would understand that the report would be in that particular standard. And then you would go to a third party, something like any of the big fours, and say like, oh, we are providing these services to our customers. Can we get audited by a third party? Because that is a requirement for the SOC reports. Can you please issue it in the following standard? So once you have addressed where, now let's go on to the question which I've already spoken, how. You basically hire a third party auditor to do the audit and deliver. Now, we understood what is a SOC report. We understood why, when, how, where, what, how questions in the slide. Now let's dwell on to what are these SOC reports. So you basically come across, and I'm going to give you a heads up to you guys that most of the terminology that I'm using is mostly from the US AICPA accounting board, which majorly specializes or has the frameworks for them. So they have defined 3 of them, which is like SOC1, SOC2, SOC3. These are the 3 reporting standards that you would come across for any kind of firms providing services. Let's say a payroll company is giving services to you. So that needs to have some kind of SOC1, SOC2 kind of report. The reason why I'm not touch basing on SOC3 is because the purpose of SOC3 is a little bit different. So now understanding what are the different standards available. So the standards that I've quoted here are particularly relevant to only SOC1. Where we're talking about SSA 18, it's a standard, which is again by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, as I referred earlier. ISE 3402, which is International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board, which is IIASB. And then you have CSA 3416, CSA 3000, which is Canadian Standards on Assurance Engagements. These are the popular ones, and majorly that you would come across in all the SOC reports. If you see a sample SOC report, SOC1 report, you would come across these standards. So there is a bit, condition with regards to the CSA 3416. So effective of attestation engagements where assurance report is dated on or after June 2017, the practitioner is required to comply with both CSA 3000 and 3416. That's a requirement from the Canadian board. So now the third step, okay, you knew a SOC report, why it's done, what are the types of SOC reports? Let's go on to what are the different types of SOC reports. So there are flavors to it. As I said, let's take an example. Let's say I'm going to spend a bit time on this particular slide. The reason is that it can get a little confusing. The reason is that earlier I said there are 3 SOC reports, SOC1, SOC2, SOC3. For each of the SOC reports, let's say SOC1, SOC2, you have again another differentiation, which is a type 1 and a type 2. So for SOC1, you have type 1, type 2. For SOC2, you have type 1, type 2. So what does a type 1 SOC report address? What does this type 2 SOC report address? So when you talk about internal controls, or for that matter, any controls that exist in the firm or on an organization, let's say a bank, you would have something called the design of the control and the operating effectiveness of the control. So when you talk about a design of the control, you're basically looking at how the control is designed. You're looking at point and time, which is basically the description of the system, how the process is designed, how does it work in point of time. Now let's say you understood the control, how it works. Now how are you going to test the control? You're gonna look at a period of time and understand that, okay, so if it's a period of time, how does it express across period of time? For example, you understood the design, you would select the population of the control. And I say population of the control, let's take an example. You have a new hire who joined your firm on June 1st. Then you have another new hire on July 1st. So there are particularly 2 new hires from June to July 2nd. So like that, for a particular year, you would have, let's say, 10 new hires. So that's the population of the control. So once you get the population of the control, you would try to see whether the design is based on a sampling methodology. You would see whether the design of the control is working perfectly or not. So let me pause a bit. Saman, can I ask you that, are you seeing my big screen of the PowerPoint, or are you not seeing that? Just wanted to check based on my internet connection.
I'm just seeing the PowerPoint presentation, flavors
Yeah.
of SOC reports. Yeah.
Yeah, so is it on a big screen or is it inside the presentation?
In a presentation.
Okay. Let me share it again. Yeah, can you see that now?
Yes, Mani, we can see you. We can see the slides. You can just make it full screen and that's all.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to do, Vandana.
If you go down, there is a fourth icon. Just go to the fourth icon, go on the right-hand side.
Right.
I was seeing your mouse, but I don't see your mouse now. So that's the fourth icon. After notes, just next to the book icon. If you click on that, it'll come on the full screen.
Sorry. Is that the way that you're seeing it?
We are seeing all your slides on the left and then right inside the screen.
Okay, let me get it right. Sorry for that. I guess something happened with my connection. So,
No problem.
Right. So, are you seeing the bigger screen, Vandana, right now?
Yes, this is better.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry for that interruption. Sorry, guys. So now that we have understood what are the flavors of the SOC report, let's go on to the next one, which is the different SOC reports, which is the SOC1, SOC2, and SOC3. So you basically have like SOC1, SOC2, and SOC3. I'm trying to explain what is the purpose of the SOC report and what are the trust principles and how SOC3 is not a restrictive report. So let's say, what is the purpose of the SOC1 report? You have an ICFR requirement, which basically says that if you're trying to use the controls of a third party, let's say a provider, the purpose of having a SOC1 report is ICFR. And who would have that, who would have that report from? It would be from a user auditor, which is basically, let's say I'm a bank and I'm trying to get a payroll service from a third party. And in that case, I need a SOC1 report from my payroll processor. So I'm the customer there. So is it publicly available? No. So you wouldn't see any kind of SOC1, SOC2 reports publicly available on internet. It's very restrictive and confidential, and it is generally not shared outside of the clients or the customers. So the examples of SOC1 who would issue is basically payroll processors, SaaS companies. Those are the list of companies that would issue. Now coming to SOC2, as I've discussed earlier, it is based on 5 trust principles. And who would get it? Basically, it would be management requirement, and it's a non-disclosure agreement. As I've said, for SOC1, SOC2 is also a restricted use of reports. And the example for this is basically the technology companies. So SOC1 and SOC2 are basically restrictive. Now coming to the SOC3 report, which is basically, again, 5 trust principles, but it's mostly a marketing tool, and it is also publicly available. So the difference between SOC1, SOC2, and SOC3 is that SOC3 is publicly available. If you would see it as a marketing tool on any of the websites that are offering SOC reports, but not for SOC1 and SOC2. And considering the standards, I've touched base before. So the AICPA SSA 18, that is for SOC1, CSA 3416, that is for SOC1, IC 3402, that is for SOC1. For SOC 2, you would base that on the trust principles, which I discussed: the security, privacy, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. SOC 3 will also touch base on those principles, but it's not extensive, and it gives, I would say, a minimum information that is required to understand what they're offering as providers. So let's go on to understanding the key questions. So now you have understood that there is SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3. Let's try to understand the 3 key questions. The reason why I have put this is these are like the common questions that you come across when people are trying to assess which SOC report is relevant. So the first key question is, so I want to understand if there is a report that would be used by customers and their auditors to plan their audit or integrated audit of customers' financial statements. So as I said, financial statements, it would be relevant to SOC1 report because it basically touches on ICR. Here it is the integrated audit that I'm talking about. Now let's go on to the next one, which is, will the report be used by your customers or stakeholders to gain confidence and place trust in service organization systems? So this again, based on the 5 trust principles, which is not relevant to SOC1 report. So this is addressed by SOC 2 or SOC 3. The next question is, do your customers have the need or ability to understand the details of the processing and controls at a service organization, the tests performed by service auditor and results of this test? So again, you would see it is addressed by a SOC 2 report, but it's not something, the difference between SOC 2 and SOC 3 is that you have results of this test, you actually test it and issue an opinion. So that's the reason why it's only SOC 2 report and not SOC 3 report. Okay, as I've said in the start of my presentation, why is that SOC 2 is gaining so much of momentum in these days? What is the big thing about it? So before going into answering that question, why would you need a SOC 2 again? Because you need an assurance from the provider saying that, okay, you have these controls in place, so I can buy this service from you. So that is the basic understanding or underlying statement. There might be different caveats and there might be different reasons and also scoping things that you would look at, but the basic premise is that. So there is a customer need. I answered that saying that, okay, there is a customer need. And why there is a customer need is you would see a trend of the customer data being moved into cloud. And most of the companies are preferring that approach because there are many advantages of moving your data into the cloud. You know, I'm not talking about those advantages, but they have already moved or people are trying to move. So trying to get a SOC 2 report in such cases is very important when you are a customer. So there is a customer need. That's the reason why it's gaining momentum. The second case is competitive advantage. Let's say you got 2 competitors, one is SOC 2 certified and one is not. So what you're trying to tell people is basically, okay, I get certified and I got an opinion from a third party, which is an auditor like Big Four and or any other audit firm for that matter. And I'm giving this assurance to you. So that places me at a different level than my competitor who doesn't even have an assurance that whether the controls at his side are working, his or her firm is working or not. So that's a competitive advantage. So when you get an opinion from a third party, an independent opinion, I would be very specific on that, an independent auditor's opinion, assessing your controls, you're basically giving a badge of trust. Right. So you're basically trying to say like, oh, so, you know, I got assessed and this is the trust badge I received from an independent opinion, independent auditor. So this is a badge of trust that I'm getting in. Now, so let's say I have a big firm, I'm trying to move, you know, everything to cloud, not realistically possible, but I'm just giving a hypothetical situation. Part of it. So what I'm trying to is like, I'm trying to assess, okay, does this, provider has SOC report? Yes or no? Does it? Yes or no? So it's like a screening technique by the customers itself. So it's basically, as a provider, you're trying to grab that opportunity, right? Because you want them as your customers. So that is the reason why it's gaining so much of momentum. There are many reasons for that. Even though this particular, I would say the SOC 2, SOC 1, and SOC 3 terminology has been there for so long, the reason is that the industry and the market is changing a bit. That's the reason why, even though we have like cloud picking up, I think the momentum is right here, where we would see most of them moving. So let me touch base on what does a SOC 1 look like. So first of all, when I'm talking so much about a report, right? So how does a report look like? Like, what does a report say about? What does SOC 1 look like? What are the contents of the SOC 1 report? So you would usually have a first page, which is called an opinion page, which talks about an independent auditor's opinion, talking about their system, description of their system, the controls that they have evaluated, and any kind of deficiencies if they have noted there. So that's the opinion page that mostly that you look at. Next is like the management assertion, talking about the description of the system and what do they think about it. And the actual description of the system, the management assertion is basically the statement from the management about the system and the controls. And the next one is description of the system itself. And the next section would be something like controls testing itself, like what controls have been tested. And then if there was any other information, you would just add in there. And there might be a few here and there changes that you would see across, but this is overall how a SOC 1 report looks like. So the important concept here for SOC 1 or SOC 2 here is basically the independent service auditor opinion. So for the independent service auditor's opinion, you would have something called a qualified opinion and unqualified opinion. So when you say unqualified opinion, you're basically saying that the report has no issues. There were no deficiencies that have been identified as part of the testing. When you say qualified report, you're basically trying to say that there were deficiencies identified in the report as part of the audit. So this is an important concept when you're looking at a SOC 1 or a SOC 2. So once we have understood that, let me touch base on how or what does a SOC 2 report comprises of. So we basically try to talk about this, saying that there are 5 trust principles that we are trying to address. And this is basically the AICPA criteria. And it's nothing to do with any other standards, just the AICPA standard. So when you look at SOC 2 report, these reports are intended to meet the needs of a broad range of users. Again, like let's say when you are a provider, you wouldn't have one customer. You would have like multitude of customers, like 10s, 20s, and everybody needs assurance from you as a provider, telling people that, we have controls. So in that case, what the provider would do is basically do an audit of their systems based on the services that they provide and issue a common report, which can be used by all of its customers. So these reports try to address the CIA, the triad, and as well as security and privacy. So these reports can play an important role in understanding how is the organization being looked at, what is the oversight happening, what are the vendor management programs they have, what are the internal corporate governance and risk management process they have, and what is the regulatory oversight they have or would be needing. And this gives you an accurate picture and understanding like, okay, so if I am buying the service from this provider, I need to know these details. So at this moment, I also want to point out that if you are a provider and you would use another organization to support one of a process, let's say you're providing payroll services and one of the website, I wouldn't say like one of the websites, but one of the websites as part of the service, not only the payroll service, plus any other service, the website is hosted by another party. So that is basically you're getting service from a sub-service organization, which is at a different, at a third party. So you need to also understand there's a concept called carved in and inclusive when you look at a SOC report. Inclusive is basically also including the controls of the sub-service organization. Carved out is basically excluding the controls and the sub-service organization. AICPA has actually suggested some changes for the subservice organization controls in terms of reporting. Basically, the complementary subservice organization controls, which should be at place by the provider, so that they can provide service to the customers. It's a little chain rule, I would say, which would be a little complicated for a first-time listener. But people who have been in this field would certainly appreciate that why this would add value to a provider who is giving services to the user. So you would also hear terms like service auditor, user auditor in SOC1 report, as well as SOC2, depending on the need. So yeah, so there are specific terminologies that you would use, and how value add they can be. As I said, they can, SOC1 and SOC2 report not only add a perspective from compliance, whether it's US SOX 404 compliance or any kind of assurance, they also drive your business, because they drive your business from being a competitive advantage, being a badge of trust, being first in the market, on items like that. So I would also see them as something like business drivers, as well as adding compliance. So now coming to the key areas. So now we understood that there is SOC1 and SOC2 report. Trying to understand, okay, I spoke a lot about saying that, SOC1 is for internal control over financial reporting. SOC2 is basically based on trust principles. Now let's try to understand, like, okay, so if I am a provider, can I get a SOC report? The answer is absolutely yes, but the answer depends. The reason is that there would be a readiness review that needs to be done while issuing a SOC report. And the reasonable time frame for doing that readiness review, as well as, let's say, for example, SOC 2 type 1 report is basically around 6 months. When I say type 1, we are looking only at the design of the control. We're not talking about the operating effectiveness over a period of time. And also, it depends on various factors, such as scope. What is the scope that you're trying to address as part of this audit? What is the size and complexity of the organization itself? So how big is the company? Is it a small company having one location? Is it a big company having multi locations? It depends on how the company is. Based on that, and understanding how many controls are relevant and how many can help, a SOC 2 or a SOC 1 report, again, type 1 or type 2 report is issued on that need. So as a person in information security all through this while, I guess the important concept here I'm trying to address is that I've also seen this from an audit perspective / compliance perspective, but I also have helped clients to achieve their SOC 1 type 1, type 2 reports, SOC 2, type 1, type 2 reports. These are interesting in terms of understanding how the business is interconnected, not just from compliance, but also understanding holistically how the business operates. So that's very important from a concept of an information from a concept of CIA as well, where your data resides, how many locations do you have, what are the co-location facilities do I have? What are the data center facilities do I have? It all depends on different factors. So when you kind of do on one SOC report, you understand, like, okay, so this firm functions on these parameters, and basically on the services that they provide, these are the things they would focus on. So it's interesting because I've been on both the sides, being an auditor as well as being on the client, trying to issue, get a SOC report. Yeah, I think at this point, I would just open the forum for any questions. But before that, I would like to thank Vandana and InfoSec Girls team for giving me this opportunity to speak today. Thank you so much.
That was a great session, Mani. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
My
Just
pleasure.
let me check if you have any questions on the live portal.
Oh, I see one last question. No questions.
Yeah. So there's no questions. I can check that. So thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being supportive. Thank you.